see. But we have made a few deals today that are excellent deals for the country. This is making our country very rich and respected again.
Last
One
month,
year ago, we were
what
dead
did this say about the impact of tariffs and where we are right now?
It shows you that we are seeing prices go up because of tariffs. This is the Fed's
as Canada's plans to recognize a Palestinian statehood at this year's UN General Assembly in September. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said one of the reasons for...
At midnight, President Donald Trump raised tariffs on Canadian imports from 25% to 35%. This is not just another trade measure. It is both an economic and political escalation with one of America's most important partners. Trump promises the move will make America richer and stronger, but the evidence suggests it may raise prices, squeeze businesses, and test the very alliances the U.S. depends on. Trump's case for tariffs. The White House gave two main reasons for the tariff hike. First, Trump blames Canada for failing to stop the flow of fentanyl and other drugs across the northern border. He has tied the opioid crisis to trade for months. Second, Trump condemned Canada's plan to recognize Palestinian statehood at the United Nations, calling it a reward for Hamas. In his view, trade pressure is the way to push allies into line. This reveals how Trump uses tariffs, not just to protect U.S. industries, but as a weapon to pursue broader political goals. He insists the U.S. is the hottest country in the world, thanks to these policies, but the costs are already showing. Canada pushes back. Prime Minister Mark Carney has warned that Canada will not be forced into a rush deal. Trade talks, he said, could extend far beyond Trump's deadline. For Carney, this is about sovereignty as much as economics. Recognizing Palestine reflects Canada's foreign policy shift, not a bargaining chip for trade. At the same time, Canada is diversifying its trade. By deepening ties with Europe and exploring Asian markets, Ottawa shows it is preparing for life with less reliance on U.S. access. Trump's tariffs may therefore accelerate Canada's pivot away from American dominance. The pressure on U.S. businesses. For American companies, the costs are immediate. Small businesses had already struggled under a 10% interim tariff. Many said they could not absorb higher costs. Now, with 35%, some may simply not survive. Large corporations, automakers, steel, aluminum, and copper producers have tried to protect consumers by swallowing the costs themselves. But they cannot do this forever. As executives remind us, they have a legal duty to protect profits for their investors. Prices will go up. Prices. The auto industry is the clearest example. Cars and parts often cross the U.S.-Canada border several times before final assembly. A 35% tariff on those components is a direct hit to costs. Already, consumer data shows people cutting back on cars and auto parts. Tariffs are now reaching household budgets. Inflation signals. The government's inflation data confirms the trend. The Fed's main measure, the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index, rose 2.6% last month, slightly above the 2.5% expected. It may sound minor, but it is a clear sign tariffs are pushing prices higher. For the Federal Reserve, this complicates policy. Officials hoped inflation would steadily ease toward 2%. Instead, tariffs risk keeping interest rates high for longer. That slows borrowing, investment, and growth. Corporate earnings reports echo the warning. Automakers and industrial firms have said tariffs are eating into profits. If costs stay elevated, companies will pass them to consumers. Far from making America richer, tariffs may weaken both business confidence and consumer spending. Long-term risks for supply chains. The U.S. and Canada share some of the most integrated supply chains in the world, especially in autos, energy, and raw materials. A 35% tariff disrupts this foundation. Over time, it could encourage companies to shift production abroad, eroding U.S. manufacturing strength. Canada, meanwhile, is actively reducing its dependence on U.S. trade. Agreements with Europe and outreach to Asian economies signal a long-term strategy. The more Washington weaponizes tariffs, the more Ottawa seeks alternatives. Beyond North America, other risks are looming. Taiwan still lacks a U.S. trade deal, and both sides have threatened tariffs above 30%. Given America's reliance on Taiwanese semiconductors, that is a vulnerability far greater than cars or steel. If Trump applies the same tariff-first strategy there, it could shake technology supply chains worldwide. The cost of power politics. Trump's 35% tariff is designed to show strength. It tells allies that Washington will use every tool, economic and political, to secure its goals. But that strength comes with a price. Businesses face higher costs they cannot continue to absorb. Consumers see inflation rising, even if gradually. Canada, under Carney, is signaling it will not be bullied, pursuing its own independent course. And global supply chains, already fragile, face new uncertainty. In the end, tariffs may give Trump leverage in negotiations, but they risk undermining the prosperity he promises. The question now is whether this strategy truly leaves America richer, or whether households and businesses will bear the cost of an expensive gamble. This is the challenge of Trump's tariff playbook. Bold, dramatic, and headline-grabbing, but fraught with economic risks that may outlast the political theater.
Have been charging very, very high tariffs to our farmers, some over 200%. And they've been treating our farmers very badly. They've been treating our country very badly for years. Fairness for our country.
Canada's Prime Minister responded on social media saying in part, Canadians will be our own best customer, creating more well-paying career hit until next week. But one key economic partner is facing an increased import tax today.
The shock
White
move.
House.
At midnight, President Donald Trump's new trade deadline took effect. With the stroke of a pen, the White House raised tariffs on Canadian imports from 25% to 35%. This isn't just another adjustment in trade rules. It's an escalation against one of America's largest trading partners. And it shows that tariffs are now being used not only to pressure trade partners, but also to push political and diplomatic agendas. The real question is, why Canada and why now? And what will this mean for American businesses, consumers, and the global economy? Trump's strategy: tariffs as a political tool. From the start, Trump has used tariffs as more than a way to balance trade. He sees them as a tool to gain leverage across different issues. In this latest order, the administration points to two reasons. First, the opioid crisis. Washington accuses Canada of not doing enough to stop the flow of fentanyl and other drugs across the northern border. The executive order names this failure as one justification. Second, and even more politically sensitive, is Canada's plan to recognize Palestinian statehood at the United Nations in September. Prime Minister Mark Carney says it's about humanitarian concern for civilians in Gaza. But for Trump, such recognition rewards Hamas. He warned online that it could damage U.S.-Canada trade. The message is clear. Tariffs are no longer just about economics. They are part of Trump's toolkit for projecting U.S. power and enforcing Washington's preferences abroad. Canada's response: Carney stands firm. Prime Minister Carney, however, has not bowed to pressure. He warned that trade talks may stretch well past Trump's deadline. Canada's response looks more long-term. Instead of giving in, Carney is building ties with Europe and Asia, reducing reliance on the United States. This sets up a sharp contrast. Trump uses tariffs for short-term leverage. Carney positions Canada for long-term independence. The conflict is no longer just about trade numbers, it's also about political direction and sovereignty. U.S. businesses under pressure. While leaders clash, American businesses are caught in the middle. Small firms were already struggling under earlier tariffs of 10%. For them, a jump to 35% could be crushing. Large corporations, automakers, and companies relying on copper, aluminum, and steel have also taken hits. Many tried to hold prices steady, but their profits shrank. With tariffs rising again, they can't keep absorbing the cost. That leaves one option: raise prices, which means the burden shifts directly to American consumers. There's also the uncertainty factor. Companies complain they cannot plan ahead when trade rules change from week to week. Investment gets delayed, hiring slows, and business confidence erodes. Inflation and economic risks. The inflation numbers already reflect the pressure. The Fed's preferred measure, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, rose 2.6% last month. That was slightly above forecasts, and tariffs were a key reason. Consumers are responding by cutting back. Spending on cars and auto parts has already fallen, a clear sign that tariffs are hitting demand in sectors tied to Canada. This creates a dangerous cycle. As businesses raise prices to survive, inflation rises. Families then spend less. The economy slows while costs climb. Economists have a word for this: stagflation, meaning weak growth combined with higher prices. And it's a scenario the Federal Reserve dreads. For Trump, who insists tariffs make America rich and respected again, This growing backlash at home could be harder to manage than any foreign pushback. Global supply chain concerns, Taiwan in focus. The uncertainty doesn't stop at Canada. Taiwan is another flashpoint. The U.S. relies heavily on Taiwan for semiconductor chips, the backbone of everything from smartphones to artificial intelligence. Yet no trade deal has been finalized. Earlier this year, Taiwan faced the threat of a 32% retaliatory tariff. If such measures go ahead, the disruption would ripple across the global tech industry. It would raise costs not just for Americans, but for companies and consumers worldwide. This shows that Canada may only be the beginning. Trump has signaled he is willing to pressure partners of every size, even those critical to global supply chains. Conclusion: more than a trade war. Trump's decision to raise tariffs on Canadian imports to 35% is about more than trade. It's about politics, leverage, and power. The goal is to force concessions and assert American strength. But the risks are growing: higher costs for businesses, rising inflation for consumers, and mounting instability in global markets. As Canada looks for new partners and U.S. companies brace for higher costs, one question hangs in the air. Will this strategy give Trump the upper hand, or will it backfire, dragging both economies into deeper trouble? For now, one thing is certain. This tariff fight is no longer just about trade. It has become a wider struggle over politics, economics, and the shape of the global order itself.